Colonel Rob Maness has a lifelong record of providing dedicated service to this nation. Having worked his way up from the enlisted ranks to full colonel, he served our country for more than 32 years. He has served as a bomber squadron commander, bomb disposal technician, Joint Chiefs of Staff operations officer, assisted the national security team with the campaign plan for the global war on terrorism. He authored the first theater nuclear war plan and served as the vice commander of America's largest airborne intelligence wing. Colonel Rob Maness is a true American hero. This is Rob Maness Live.
Welcome back to Whistleblower Wednesday. The Rob Maness Show is live on Worldview Tube and our X Spaces simulcast. Well, devastating consequences. Unequal treatment before the law is deadly. As you can see in that video, as the animal that brutally executed Ukrainian refugee Irina Zaruska as she sat quietly on a train in North Carolina, returning home from one of the 3 jobs she was working to save money in order to buy a car. At the very beginning of her American dream journey, that murderer was released from jail 14 times before he committed this heinous act. The train is also a gun-free zone, so Irina nor any other American exercising their Second Amendment rights could take that animal out after he did what he did, or God help us, even stop it if they were able to see it. And yeah, there's a race element too that the mainstream media is covering up. You could hear him say in the video twice, "Got that white girl. Got that white girl." This episode is about blowing the whistle on our governments at all levels, depriving us of our rights. And this incident only highlights that problem. In Massachusetts, once the birthplace of the concept of individual rights, the state government is constantly violating American civil rights. And today we're going to be discussing a case of an Air Force veteran that is being treated inhumanely simply for possessing a legally owned firearm. My guest today to bring us this story is Mr. Toby Leary. Toby's the president and co-founder with business partner Brendan Brickland of Cape Gun Works in Hyannis, Massachusetts. Toby is now carrying his love for firearms, self-defense, and the Second Amendment into making that important business venture thrive. He's also in Toby Leary's fine woodworking and has been hired by luxury homeowners on the Cape and Islands for 20 years. When Toby's not helping a homeowner plan their kitchen remodel, he's helping somebody select the right firearm and equipment at Cape Gun Works Pro Shop. Toby, welcome to the Rob Maness Show. And I have to say, there's some breaking news as we came on the air that Charlie Kirk of Turning Point USA has been shot by a person on campus in the Utah college that he was doing an event at, where he got his start was on college campuses, bringing the truth about America and individual rights and that kind of thinking to America's universities, which, as we know, are bastions of Marxism and tyranny at this point. Welcome to the Rob Maness Show, Toby.
Thanks so much for having me, Rob. And certainly my heart goes out to the Kirk family, and I'm praying for Charlie for a speedy recovery. Hopefully he makes it. That is a terrible tragedy. Awful news to hear.
Yeah, Charlie loves his country like we all do that understand it and are devoted to the values that sprung out of Massachusetts where you live, man.
Yeah.
And we're all praying for him. He loves his family, his little kids. He loves them dearly, works very hard to provide for them. And we hope he pulls through this. Last reporting was that he was in critical condition. So everybody keep the prayers coming. But this is just an example. I bet you $20 that campus is a gun-free zone, Toby. I bet you $20 it's a gun-free zone. And I bet you when they get the individual that tried to assassinate him, he's going to be treated differently than Kyle Wayne Collada is being treated in Massachusetts, isn't he?
It seems to be the trend, unfortunately, like that horrific video you played of the government mandated gun-free zone on the train in Charlotte. And we see this every day. I mean, it's just awful when, the government dictates a gun-free zone, but then refuses to participate in making sure that type of thing can't happen. We see it in sporting halls or, stadiums where they disarm people, but they have metal detectors, a huge police presence, an armed presence. You see it at airports. You see it at, whenever a VIP comes to town or whatever, but they refuse in some of the most critical situations, like a school where we send the most precious commodity that we have, our children, that we've been given incredible responsibility for. And we have watched time and time again as people continue to be attracted, psychopathic, evil people attracted to these gun-free zones, knowing there'll be less of a chance of any type of response or armed, type of person being there. And that is truly evil, Colonel. And I appreciate you having me on. I really do. Yeah. But when it's that dark in somebody's heart that they want to get a high body count or kill somebody like this poor girl on the train that's just sitting there minding her own business and innocent just because of the way she looks. I mean, it really is a huge problem. And fast forward to Kyle Wayne, who's been in our state now for a little over 80 days and has been incarcerated almost the exact amount of time. He's approaching 80 days behind bars for just choosing to exercise a constitutionally protected right with guns that were purchased lawfully and legally in his home state of Arizona as he's traveling through to another free state of New Hampshire. And unfortunately, he found out the hard way how Massachusetts, the birthplace of freedom, as you so aptly pointed out, is now hostile to constitutionally enumerated rights. And he has been incarcerated under the dangerousness statute in Massachusetts, meaning they will lock him up until trial if they could, but they're only able to do it for 120 days. And ironically, they took all his guns away. So how is he dangerous? If they say the gun is what makes him dangerous, once they've taken all his guns away, how is he dangerous? It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, this dangerous person law, is it associated with guns specifically?
It's guns or the commission of some violent act. If I guess it could probably apply to somebody who has, a knife or trying to, kill somebody, or in an act of the commission of a violent crime. The spirit of the law is truly to make sure that bad people stay behind bars while pending trial, right? If they can keep them incarcerated, or at least until a dangerousness hearing has been had, where the state can now bring facts forward as to whether or not they should be allowed to be released into society. If they're that dangerous, then they shouldn't be, right? If they pose an imminent threat to themselves or others, then the argument should and could be made to keep that person locked up. But unfortunately, the way this has been weaponized is they make the argument that, because a gun was involved or owned or on somebody's person, now that makes them a danger, even though there's no pattern or history prior. He's not a criminal. He doesn't have a record. So that should weigh in on whether or not he truly is dangerous, or what was the activity that he was doing. Was he robbing a liquor store, or was he, trying to make money doing DoorDash deliveries at 9:30 at night? Well, if it's the latter, maybe you should consider that he's a citizen of, Arizona in the United States, and he's passing through peacefully, trying to earn some money on his way to New Hampshire. That's exactly the situation. And the state has weaponized this law to make sure that anyone who would dare exercise their right to keep and bear arms in this state without first obtaining a government mandated permission slip will suffer the most dire consequences for daring exercise that right. And unfortunately, this is baked into the law. This is baked into it. It's not like oh man, we didn't see this coming. This is exactly the design of this type of law. It has nothing to do with whether or not Kyle is actually dangerous. It's, oh, he had a gun. We're going to throw the book at him and make an example out of him so that, they think that by setting up roadblocks or encumbrances or infringements to the right to keep and bear arms, they can slow the trend of people who might come here and want to be armed. And I think that is absolutely antithetical to the Constitution, which is, you have a protected right. And no one would make the argument that this is a good law. This makes us safer by locking up someone you don't need to worry about. And all the while, people like the guy you just showed on that video are the commonplace in Massachusetts. Our prisons and our jails are empty, Colonel. Empty in Massachusetts. In fact, Barnstable County House of Correction, which is right up the road from me, it is a state-of-the-art, brand new facility that can hold 550 inmates. On a good day, it has about 175 people in it. And they've just let everybody go. They just say, oh yeah, good behavior, personal recognizance, low bail, no bail, whatever the case is. And they just let them out. And yet these are people that are frequent flyers with rap sheets and, history of, fentanyl distribution and drug dealing and whatnot. It's just unbelievable. They'll let the most violent element of society back out on the street, but somebody like the Air Force veteran Kyle Kalata, who was honorably discharged and has no prior criminal record, they will try to make an example out of him. It's horrific.
So let me ask you about the law before we go to the first break, and then we'll dive into Kyle's specific sequence of events that occurred with Kyle, because I'm very curious about that. But the law itself, so state law, if I understood what I read correctly, and I've watched some of y'all's videos, and Cam Edwards, who's a friend of mine, his videos about this. The state law says you have to have a license in order to have a firearm on your person or in your house or in your car.
Yes.
Or to buy one?
All of the above. To literally buy a gun or possess one in your home or possess one on your body or in your car or to and from the range, you have to have one of two forms of ID: a firearms identification card or a license to carry. The FID is only valid for long guns that are non-semi-automatic, like a pump shotgun, lever action. That's it. And the license to carry covers pistols and semi-automatic rifles and shotguns. And if you don't have one of those and you dare move to our state and don't obtain that license, then you're going to suffer the same consequence of Kyle.
Wow.
And
so I'm an Air Force veteran too. I was an Air Force kid too. My mom and dad drove me all across this country. I've been in every state I've been in or over every single state in the country, but in 49 of the 50 physically. And if I'm driving, and I was actually stationed in Cambridge at the Kennedy School of Government for a year. So if I'm driving from South Dakota, where I was at the time, and I cross the border into Massachusetts, and I've got my pistol in the car, in the glove box with me. There's no bullets in it, but there are bullets there. I could be arrested for that if I'm stopped and caught.
Most likely you will be arrested unless you can show that you've obtained this government mandated permission slip called the license to carry. And they are issuing non-resident license to carry. And this has proved to be their way of saying, oh yeah, you could just comply with our laws and then carry a gun while you're here on vacation or whatever. But the burden of obtaining that license is extremely high. It might take you a year to a year and a half just to get the interview that you need to appear in Chelsea in person after taking your government mandated class for that same license.
And you know what it sounds like? I was stationed in England in the early 1980s, and it sounds exactly like what the laws of the Queen at the time, now the King of England, had. That people from Massachusetts rose up and violently threw out of town and out of the country. It's amazing that any legislator would sign on to a law like that, let alone that it could still stand constitutionally. Well, Toby, we got to take a commercial break. When we come back, though, I've got a hand up in the live audience, so we've got a question there, and I want to go through the details of the sequence of events of what happened with Mr. Collada and his fiance on this event, because it's very curious, very curious. We'll be right back with Toby Leary of Cape Guns.
Hello, I'm Brandon House. I want to thank you for all your support at wvwfoundation.com that helps make possible pushing out 24/7 content for free. Without your support, we'd have to put it all behind a paywall. But thanks to you and your support through our foundation, we're able to push it out for free as a broadcast service and broadcast ministry of WVW Foundation. Please consider going there and setting up an automatic monthly contribution, or go there and make an occasional contribution. If you prefer to support us through the mail, you'll find our mailing address there at wvwfoundation.com. You can also call and make your contribution over the phone by calling 901-825-0652. That's 901-825-0652. Again, all these details are available at wvwfoundation.com. Thank you for your support as we try to help people around the world understand the times through the lens of a Christian worldview.
Imagine this. You're a U.S. Air Force veteran legally owning firearms in your home state of Arizona, and you're on your way to New Hampshire with your fiance to start a new chapter in your life. You get pulled over for an expired registration, and the next thing you know, you're thrown in jail in Massachusetts for simply having your legally owned guns with you in your car. That's exactly what happened to Kyle Wayne Collada. No violence, no threats. Just a guy trying to make some money while living out of his car and doing DoorDash to get by. And now he's being held without bail under Massachusetts' ridiculous dangerousness statute, all because he's legally carrying firearms that are perfectly legal in his home state, and I would add most states in the country. This is exactly what Chapter 135 was designed to do: criminalize peaceful Americans for victimless crimes. If Kyle had been just a few miles north of New Hampshire, none of this would have happened. But Massachusetts, they turned him into a criminal for crossing an imaginary line with his rights intact. This is an attack on every gun owner's rights, veteran or not. No one should be punished for exercising their Second Amendment rights. That's exactly what's happening to him. We need to fight for Kyle's freedom and send a message that this is legal overreach and will not stand. Spread the word, share this. We won't stay silent on this injustice. Free Kyle Wayne.
Free Kyle Wayne. We will not stay silent. Welcome back to Whistleblower Wednesday, and we're going to do our part to get some visibility on this issue. And I'll just remind everybody that before we came on the air, apparently there was a shooting in Utah at a college campus, and Charlie Kirk was shot. So everybody, please keep him and his family and this country in your prayers, folks, because there are people out there that are looking to start a war. And unfortunately, with wars, once you start them, you lose control of them. Just ask Mr. Putin and Mr. Zelensky and NATO and the United States and Gaza, the Hamas people. Once you open the war box, you lose control of it very quickly. I don't advise it, but you're right there on the line, if not over the line, right now, folks. And I'm talking to you, all you lefties, you Marxists, you crazies out there. That's who I'm talking about. And my guest today is Toby Leary of Cape Gun Works in Hyannis, Massachusetts. And Toby is one of the great folks from Massachusetts and gun rights advocates and a gun shop owner, co-owner that is fighting to help Air Force veteran Kyle Collada at least be released from jail. He's been in jail 77 days, which is only 3 days shy of the 80 days he was in Massachusetts. And Toby, you know, your video there was very good, but I have a question. Was the car they were driving tagged with Arizona plates?
And I don't know if it was Arizona or Massachusetts plates. I know it was his fiance's car that they were driving, and the registration had lapsed. She said that they ran out of money and the insurance lapsed, and so then it was canceled. She knew she had to get that right, and she did within 72 hours of this stop. And by the way, just a quick point of clarification, they were only in our state for 30 hours total before he got arrested.
Wow.
They were just kind of working their way through basically across country. And so he's already done more jail time than the Boston city councilor that admitted to bribing the people of Boston, of bribery and racketeering type of charges, where she was accepting payments in money and basically defrauding the people of Boston from money. And she's only going to do 30 days. It's unbelievable. But regardless, I'm not trying to go down a rabbit hole. He's already done more time than most violent criminals will actually do in our state. There is no stomach. There's no will to lock violent felons away for long periods of time. I know somebody here in the very town I'm sitting in right now that was supposed to do an 8-year sentence and got out after 2 years. He was a violent fentanyl dealer and got out after 2 years. It's unbelievable.
It is unbelievable. Some days we live in an unbelievable society and an unbelievable world, my friend. So what gave the law enforcement officers the ability to search the vehicles? They had to search the vehicle to find the firearms, right?
Yeah. So what happened was they apparently witnessed a legal merge, whatever the heck that means. Some civil traffic infraction where he didn't merge properly or she didn't merge properly. I don't even know who was driving, to be honest. But they had a regular traffic stop. Once it became apparent that the car was unregistered, they were going to tow the vehicle. And so they said, hey, you need to get out what you need to get out. And he had taken a few things out of the car. And then the police officer observed an ammo box in the back seat of the vehicle and said, what is that? And he said, oh, that's ammunition. And he said, do you have any guns in the car? He said, yeah, everything I own is in this car. I'm literally moving across country. So everything he owned was in the vehicle. And so he said, well, do you have a license to carry? And he said, a what? What's that? I'm from Arizona. I bought these guns legally and lawfully. I don't need anything there. I just need state issued ID and pass a background check. And that's the extent of it. And so the police officer promptly arrested him for unlicensed possession of a firearm and charged him. I mean, they literally seized BB guns out of the car too. There was guns that were heirlooms to him that were handed down from his father or grandfather. And, they seized everything. And then they basically charged him with unlicensed possession and denied bail 4 times. So that, I think, is all you need to know about the story that they, and you know what is ironic is the local media, Boston city media, no one has touched this story. And I know why. Number one, because most people think, there's more to the story. There's got to be more to the story. No one arrests and imprisons a non-criminal for just simple possession of a firearm. Yes, they do. In Massachusetts, happens all the time. And
Yeah.
we have two Supreme Judicial Court cases from the Mass Supreme Judicial Court that just were adjudicated in the last year about two New Hampshire residents. So this happens all the time. And you are allowed safe passage through all 50 states as long as you meet certain requirements. And the problem is that doesn't necessarily mean you won't be arrested. It just gives you an affirmative defense in front of the judge, right? So you can say the Firearms Owners Protection Act grants me safe passage, and then but there's no definition of what that looks like. They can't, well, did you stop for gas? Did you stop to grab something to eat? Did you have a hotel that night? That, none of that has been really, there's no guidance, there's no case law even on a lot of that. And so whether or not he had it locked in unloaded and locked in a case separate from where he was, or whether it was on his body, loaded, either case, it didn't matter in this case. He was getting arrested and he was going to get put in jail under the dangerousness statute until his day in court, which still hasn't even been set, to my knowledge, the trial date. So he's on a lawyer now. Oh, and by the way, Rob, one thing that should be noted is if this had happened in Boston, they've let like 1,000 people out of jail and dismissed their charges altogether because of the strike that's happening right now with the public defenders. So because this happened in Gardner, Mass, and a public defender was available, they're throwing the book at him. But if he was in Boston, where they're letting people who are being charged with violent crimes, they're letting them go and dismissing their charges because they can't be given, it's madness. And
Crazy. Well, let's take a question from the audience real quick before we get to this next break. Go ahead. Shell is our hostess over there. Go ahead, Shell.
We have Buckster.
Hey, Colonel. Hey, Toby. Good to hear you, and I'm glad you're talking about this important subject. The only other thing I wanted to say was a statement. What makes this even more outrageous is that just last week we had a violent criminal with a long record who was employed by the city of Boston, pulled over by a state trooper. State trooper attempted to remove him from the vehicle. He refused. He went to tase him. That criminal took his taser, tased the state trooper, and he was found with an illegal machine gun. Not just an illegal weapon, but an illegal machine gun. That gentleman's out on bail the very next day.
Wow. That gets to why I wanted to also talk about unequal treatment of the under the law. I mean, we fought this country fought a war between the states that resulted in, one of the things that resulted in was the 14th Amendment requiring equal treatment under the law. And we just don't see it anymore, Toby. We just don't see it.
Yeah, I think as Clarence Thomas pointed out, that the Second Amendment has become a disfavored right. That's what he's written about in many of his, whenever the court refuses to grant certiorari on a case, he writes usually a pretty good dissent on, how they should be taking this case. And one of I think this is the perfect example under equal protection, or how the right to keep and bear arms has become a disfavored right. You could look at taxing, right? The Minneapolis Star v. the Madison Star versus Minneapolis was a Supreme Court case where they were looking at the taxation of the ink in the paper for the newspaper company, ruled unconstitutional. They said you can't tax the ink in the paper. Then you have the poll tax, 1963, $1.50 tax on going to the polls, right? They ruled that unconstitutional. Then you see the Murdoch v. Pennsylvania, 1943. It was a First Amendment case where they were taxing or selling a license to a Jehovah's Witness to go door to door and sell his wares, sell his paperwork or his paper. And that went all the way to the Supreme Court and was ruled unconstitutional. And in fact, that syllabus says that you cannot charge a fee, sell a license, tax, or permit for the enjoyment of a constitutionally protected right. And yet here we are in 2025, where, not only are guns taxed locally and state, they're also federally taxed. And then we also have all kinds of other hoops to jump through, like licenses and permits and background checks. And nobody, should they, but they would never permit any other enumerated right be treated the same way as the Second Amendment. We would never suffer through a licensure of, being able to go to church or to write in a newspaper. Nor should we, right? And yet here we are. This is the last of the freedoms that is able to be taxed. It's able to be restricted. It's able to be encumbered. It's able to be licensed or permitted. And yet people think, oh, well, just because it's guns. Well, that wasn't the way the founders saw it. They said, hey, this is so important. We're going to add some verbiage to this right that says shall not be infringed. That was a notice to government to keep your hands off. And yet we've completely lost our way in the last 40, 50, maybe even 100 years. When it came to the Second Amendment, we think we can do things with that right that would never be permitted to be applied to any other right.
No, you're absolutely right. And that erosion of that right is leading to attacks on the other rights, the freedom to gather. The January 6th prosecutions is one of those erosions through the law. The freedom to speak and think freely is being eroded, and government force is being used to do things like make people say preferred pronouns or deny their religious beliefs because of transgender ideology. But it's the Second Amendment erosion that has enabled every single one of those, and we got to put a stop to it. We got to take a break, Toby, and we'll be right back. We'll have another little clip. This will be from Toby again. They have asked the Civil Rights Division at the federal level to step in on this, and I think rightly so. We'll be right back with Toby Leary.
We, the people, are the final arbiter of what is and what isn't constitutional. Not the courts, not the legislature, and not the executive branch. Hey everyone, Toby from Cape Gunworks and Rapid Fire Radio, and I want to let everybody know that we have officially asked Harmeet Dillon to look into the civil rights violations of Kyle Kalata, the U.S. Air Force veteran who has been detained under dangerousness and held without bail here in Massachusetts for daring exercise his right to keep and bear arms in this state. He crossed the state line and didn't have a license because he was from Arizona, and now has been held for well over 2 months. And we're asking Harmeet Dillon to take a serious look at the civil rights violations. I don't know how the government gets away with this with Title 18, Section 242, which states that any official that deprives somebody of their constitutionally protected rights can suffer all kinds of consequences for those actions. And yet here we are in 2025. We have people like Kyle in jail, and we have people like Scott LePayne on home arrest. And I'm sure there's a whole bunch of other people that are there for minor victimless crimes around the
Minor victimless crimes. It's like an administrative violation. You know, it's like staying past the parking meter. These crimes are, and you've got Air Force veteran Mr. Collada incarcerated for 77 days now. 77 days, and he's, I'm assuming, appeared before a judge 4 times and been denied bail each time because somehow he's dangerous, but people like the monster that killed the Ukrainian refugee young lady in North Carolina get out 14 times. And as my guest Toby Leary said just a moments ago, they've emptied the jails. 1,000 prisoners let out in Boston because of a shortage of public defenders. And these are violent people. These are people that sell fentanyl that kills your children and kills your grandchildren and kills you. They're people that shoot people or knife people in the neck from behind without warning for no reason except they're evil. And you got a good man that's in jail for 77 days because he just happened to get stopped in the People's Republic of Massachusetts. That's what I'll call it. And it's a shame that the state that birthed the concept of creators' individual rights is using its government to crush those rights. Toby, welcome back. I agree with you. I think it's right that you asked Ms. Dillon, who is the Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights, and to step in here. What do y'all think she can do at this point, since it's still in the state courts, I assume?
Well, I think as far as the application for Kyle Collada, I'm not sure there's anything they can do to step in and get him freed, if you will. But what could happen is under that Title 18, Section 242, which says any official under the color of law which deprives somebody of their civil rights can be incarcerated, fined, or both, up to and including the death penalty if what they've done leads to the death of the person that they're depriving of those rights. And it's really an interesting read. If you read it, it very rarely gets applied, unfortunately, when courts or people do deprive people of their constitutionally protected rights because of things called immunity. There's judicial immunity, there's legislative immunity, there's all kinds of immunity and protection under the executive branch for police officers and whatnot. And I get it. Like, you don't want frivolous claims of everybody who's got a problem with what law you've passed or your enforcement of said law. That would be ridiculous. It would tie up our courts forever. However, when somebody's actually, their constitutional rights are being totally deprived under the color of law, they're using their badge or their office or their elected position to do that. Now something needs to be done, because getting back to what you were talking about earlier, about, we could go over a line that will be very hard to come back from. The people are the final arbiter of what is and what isn't constitutional. That's what James Madison wrote in Federalist 49. He also wrote that the legislature is the most important branch of government because the legislators come from the people, are there for one purpose and one purpose only, to be the confidential guardians of the people's rights. And what's happened here in Massachusetts is the state legislature, instead of being the confidential guardians of their rights, they're actually eroding their rights. They're going up on Beacon Hill. They're violating the oath of office that they swore to protect and uphold, which is the Constitution. And they themselves go into their chambers and now are the adversarial position to the very thing they swore to uphold. So they've broken their oath. Instead of being the gatekeeper of our right, they are now the oath breaker, and they are actually the enemy of our rights. So when all three branches of government conspire against the people, the executive branch, the judicial, and the legislative branch, to deprive us of our rights, where does that leave us? Well, it leaves us with the one box of American freedom that we don't ever want to have to exercise, the ammo box. We'd prefer it to be done at the ballot box. We'd prefer it to be done on the soap box. You know, the saying goes, the four boxes of American justice. And we don't want to have to do it from the jury box either, although that is a more effective tool. The point I'm trying to make is they are going to leave us with no other choice at some point if they continue down this road of depriving us of our rights and nobody's doing anything about it. So they're already doing a really good job of coming in, you know, with ICE and ERO and, you know, taking people who shouldn't be in our communities and taking them out. Because a lot of times the most violent people in our society are people who shouldn't even be here in the first place. And we're paying to clothe them, house them, feed them, transport them, educate them, not to mention the medical.
If we can't get the Colonel back in here, sorry about that.
Nope.
Yeah, yeah, you're absolutely right.
Hopefully the Colonel will get back in here on the next break. I'm letting him know now.
Sorry about that audio mix up there, Toby. Yeah, you're absolutely right. The amongst the people, I mean, you've been involved actively in politics at the local and state level for some time now. What do you hear from just the average American that still believes in America in Massachusetts? I have to have confidence that there are some somewhere. You know?
Absolutely. So a year ago, we were able, right when this law passed, Chapter 135 of the Acts of 2025, a bunch of us said, enough is enough. This has to stop. So we got a signature campaign going to have a ballot committee formed so that we could repeal Chapter 135 on the 2026 election, which we were very successful in doing. We were able to raise over 100,000 signatures in 5 weeks without a single paid signature gatherer. So people were sick and tired of being the whipping post of every time something negative happens with a firearm.
3 hours and see how everything goes on.
They like to blame us and say, hey, you know, it's your fault because you own a gun, when really, no. Nothing could be further from the truth. Like you pointed out earlier, Colonel, how we had a gentleman, I refuse to say his name. He had over 110 arrests. He had over 30 prior felon in possession of a gun, which carries a minimum mandatory of 1.5 years in the state of Massachusetts. 30, you know, that's 45 years in jail that he should have been serving concurrently. And he was out after 2.5 years, and he murdered a police officer, Sean Gannon, who went to serve a warrant on him. And the truth of the matter is, these people should be locked up for long periods of time. That would make society instantly safer. You don't need to pass laws. You don't need to infringe on people's right to keep and bear arms. You don't need to lock up Air Force veterans. You need to lock up the most criminal, violent element and keep them in jail for as long as the law allows. That's the recipe to making society safer and without infringing on anyone's rights. And unfortunately, you know, we've kind of lost our way as a society. But I will say that the people of Massachusetts are fed up, and we are really actively trying to kind of bridge that gap between the gun owning community and the non-gun owning community of people who still believe in the Constitution, who still believe in their rights, who still take pride in the fact that the American Revolution was started here in Massachusetts 250 years ago over gun control, I might add. And, you know, I think once people start to thaw out, and I've said many times, we're actually suffering from Stockholm syndrome here in Massachusetts. We think we've been beat down so much by gun control and by our infringement of our rights, we get used to it to a certain extent, and we don't even remember what freedom looked like. So hopefully we'll be able to recover that and repeal this horrible law.
They should make it mandatory that every politician in Massachusetts from the local level up has to walk the Freedom Trail twice a year at minimum. At least to get them some exercise and make them read about it, Well, if we can't get it done there, where are we going to be able to get it done, Toby? I got to take my last break here, and I apologize for the audio mix-up. Our Spaces was having some technical difficulties. But if we can't get it done here in Boston and in Massachusetts, the cradle of rights, the cradle of American rights, ladies and gentlemen, where can we get it done? We'll be right back on Worldview Tube, the Rob Maness Show. It's Whistleblower Wednesday. We have to protect our rights, especially the Second Amendment, or we'll lose them all. I'll see you in a minute.
News is moving faster than ever, and so are we. Worldview Tube brings you 24/7 live stream coverage and now real-time alerts when it matters most. Once you have the Worldview Tube app installed, exit the app and navigate your way to Settings. In Settings, locate the tab labeled Notifications. Select the Notifications tab. Scroll down until you locate the Worldview Tube app icon. Select the tab, and here you can turn on and customize your notification experience for the Worldview Tube app. News doesn't wait, and neither should you. Turn on push notifications to stay informed. Every headline as it happens.
Any gun that is lawfully and legally owned, that is in common and ordinary use, cannot be banned. Why can't we just say Heller was the standard and Bruin reaffirmed Heller, and why can't we make government do what they're supposed to do? We have the worst court systems in America here in the district and federal courts in Massachusetts. The First Circuit Court of Appeals is possibly the worst when it comes to the Second Amendment in the country, hands down. So my hope isn't that we work our way through the courts on this side of, the Mason-Dixon. It really is that we need people like Harmeet Dillon, the Civil Rights Director and Assistant Attorney General, to look at the civil rights violations in Massachusetts that are occurring every day to good people with no criminal record, all because of these malum prohibitum laws that have been broken, that the politicians have no privilege to enact in the first place. We, the people, are the final arbiter of what is and what isn't constitutional. Not the courts, not the legislature, and not the executive branch. We send them there to do the job of representing us. And then they go violate their oath of office that they swore to protect the Constitution. They affirmed an oath, and then they break that very oath by the bills that they proffer and posit in the legislature and then ultimately pass and a governor signs unconstitutionally. That is a clear and direct violation of Title 18, Section 242, and we shouldn't stand by and take it.
Whistleblower Wednesday, and folks, we've had breaking news the whole show. Charlie Kirk of Turning Point USA was shot at a campus event out in Utah. He started, Charlie started in politics on campus events, bringing the message of America, that what we're talking about today with Toby Leary of Massachusetts, bringing that message to college kids, because he knew and knows that it's the universities that the indoctrination of things like Marxism and those concepts of critical theory are being sowed. Those seeds are being sowed. It shows in our society, shows in the polling, and it shows in our judiciary and the laws that so-called Americans they're passing that are blatantly unconstitutional. And Toby, I wanted to play that clip because you talk about firearms in common use. And that's the Heller decision. I think Justice Scalia wrote some of those words. And a firearm that's in common use, like, I don't know, the AR-15, semi-automatic, 5.56 or 223 rifle, the black platform. It looks like an old M16 or the modern MP4, which are military weapons. but it's semi-automatic, just like your regular old semi-automatic deer rifle or semi-automatic shotgun, or your semi-automatic pistol. Nothing unusual about it, but those are the targets the most. The banning that and the instruments of attachments like a magazine and those kind of things, and it's blatantly unconstitutional to pass laws that do those kinds of things. Why are these laws able to stand?
It's activist courts. That's the only way, because they really go through some serious mental gymnastics to arrive at the unconstitutional law that is being upheld by the court. Really, when you see what happened in Heller, McDonald, and Bruin, you would say there's no chance any gun control law can stand, because the test is the burden is on government to prove that there is a historical tradition around firearms restrictions at the founding from 1791 when the Second Amendment was ratified. And you should see some of these cases that they twist and they totally, package up and say like, yeah, this is consistent. We had one here. There's a judge. His name is, it's a district court judge. Selya was his last name, Seyla. And he upheld our assault weapon ban and said that it is consistent with our nation's tradition of firearms restrictions from our founding era. And he gave he didn't show his work on how he got there. That's all he said. He just said, oh yeah, this is consistent. Banning a gun that is in common and ordinary use by lawful people all throughout our country. Hundreds of millions of them exist. There's probably 100 million guns in, operation, maybe AR-15 or whatever, semi-automatic rifle of some sort out there in the wild being used every day for lawful purposes. That's the standard right there. If you can't show that isn't the case, then the government has to prove that there's a longstanding history and tradition of banning or restricting that type of thing that you're trying to uphold. He couldn't do it. And he said, oh no, I did it. And so now we wait. We get to bear the burden of the cost, the infringement, the threat of government intrusion and arrest, and, at the end of a gun, and incarceration, as Kyle Collada is suffering from right now. And then it's our job to prove that we're not what the government says we are, which is crazy. That isn't how American jurisprudence works. It is you're innocent until proven guilty. And if you haven't committed a crime, you shouldn't be able to be incarcerated for just, some, like I said in the video, the malum prohibitum, which means it's illegal because we say so. And if you're going to eliminate the Constitution or ignore the Constitution and hold that the superior document is this law that the legislature passed, then there is no such thing as rights. And everything is subject to a simple majority vote by the legislature and a signature by the governor or president. You have no rights if that's the case, because I've said it to senators that have come in my shop, and I said, what's this? If you can do this around the Second Amendment, what's to stop you if you got enough votes, a simple 51% majority in the House and the Senate, and a signature by the governor for banning Catholics? And they kind of scoffed at it and say, "Oh, I said, can you do that? Can you ban Catholics?" They said, "Of course not." And I said, "Why? Why can't you ban Catholics?" And they said, "Well, because you can't." And I said, "Well, that's exactly what you're doing around the Second Amendment." We just had a ruling come out last week where the district court judge upheld our unconstitutional approved weapons roster. And if you're from a free state, you're like, what the heck's an approved weapons roster? I think there's only 2 states in the whole country, Massachusetts and California. And we're always trying to outdo each other as to who's the worst state to live in as far as, everything else. But they upheld this roster and said, as long as there's a gun available for sale in your state, we haven't violated your constitutional rights. It's like, this is nuts. When Heller was clear that guns that are in common and ordinary use for lawful purposes cannot be banned. Period.
That's right.
Full stop. Can't
That's
do
right.
it.
That's
And
right.
here we are, activist judges do it all the time.
It's interesting because, Concord and Lexington were all about the British wanting to ban common use weapons.
Yeah.
The musket,
Yep.
the long rifle, the hunting rifle, and those kind of things. That's all it was about. That's why this is our tradition, not the tradition of banning weapons, the tradition of fighting government with violence if necessary to prevent them from banning common use weapons, because the founders knew. Well, we've still got some hands up in the audience. I want to take one more question before we get to the end of the show real quick and get an update on Mr. Collada's case. Go ahead, Shell.
We have Liz, sir.
Hi, Colonel Toby. Very nice to meet you. My question is, how do you get a license in a state you do not live in? Don't you, and even with a driver's license, don't you have like 30 or 60 days after you move to a state to get a license?
Yeah.
I know here in Virginia.
Sorry, this is a great question, by the way. And because if you are going to move to Massachusetts, say you move to Massachusetts, you have 60 days to apply for that license. They give you a grace period. Now, they're not going to issue the license for whatever, 120 days, most likely, but they give you 60-day window to apply for said license. But if you're not moving here, if you're coming from out of state, in the case of Kyle, who was moving to New Hampshire, but let's just say he decided to live here. He was literally living out of his car. He was indigent, moving, had no permanent residence. How do you apply for a license without a domicile to write an address on, right? You can't. So again, does that make you not able to participate in a constitutional right because you don't have an address? It's a great question for a court. I don't think it's ever been asked, but I don't think any other right would be violated. It's almost like when you go back to the original Constitution where you couldn't vote unless you were a landowner, right? We'd never go back to that again. But now we're saying if you dare exercise the Second Amendment without the government mandated permission slip, and if you don't have a domicile to put on your form, you're going to be denied your right to keep and bear arms in our state. And it's a great question, but technically there is a path to getting a non-resident license in Massachusetts. It's just extremely difficult on purpose.
It just makes me wonder. I mean, I have firearms. I moved to the state. I have to go apply for a license. Okay, I go apply for it, but what do I do with them in the meantime? It's crazy.
Yeah, you're given a little grace period, not long enough to actually cover the application period. And we have a customer of mine, really, of someone I've tried to help, who is a well-to-do person. He was a doctor. It was made national news. He went down to DC with one of his firearms. Didn't know there was no reciprocity. He tried to go into a museum, saw no firearms. So he tried to give his gun to the police officer standing by and said, "Hey, hold this for me while I go in. I'll come out and get it on the way out." You can't have a gun in DC. What are you, nuts? So they arrest him. He spends 4 days in jail. When he came back to Massachusetts and his license expired, he went to reapply and they said, "Nope, you're not getting your license because you have a gun charge on your, in your history now." And that's really the two-pronged approach. They're trying to make people prohibited persons by either violating the complex checkerboard of laws or becoming a prohibited person through the malum prohibitum crime that they violated. So really, you're either ultimately they want to make it so no one can own guns. So how do you do it? You make everybody unqualified or unsuitable, whatever the language is. It's madness.
Crazy. Well, we got about a minute left. Go ahead, give us an update on Kyle, where he's at legally, before I let you go, and tell folks where they can find you guys in the shop and you and any other business you want to talk about.
Yeah, thanks so much. Again, I really want to get the spotlight of truth on this. If it can happen to Kyle, it can happen to anyone. You can go to goal.org, GOAL.org/free Kyle. Even if you just go to goal.org, there's a tab, Free Kyle. You can go there. You can donate to the Give, Send, Go. You can donate to his lawyer who's already, racked up tens of thousands of dollars in his legal defense. There is a hearing coming up. I heard one of the charges has been dropped. thankfully, because he's facing over a decade in jail if he's convicted on all counts, which is nuts for not ever doing anything wrong. And so that's really, really important that we fund this. And he's got a great lawyer, Dan Hagen. He's doing everything right. And hopefully in the next few days or a week or so, we're going to have him out of jail. That's what we're really hoping. We're going to have a press conference on Monday at the State House, hopefully with him standing with us. But otherwise, we'll be, but yeah, go to goal.org. You can also go to capegunworks.com if you want to get up to date on what's going on there.
All right. Well, thank you, Toby. And thank you and your family and your friends for continuing to fight for everybody's rights. That is a public service and a service to the nation in and of itself. And we deeply appreciate you trying to help this Air Force veteran and his family and all the other folks you've been helping. Folks, I'm going to stay in the audio space on X. Afterwards, we can talk about the Charlie Kirk situation. And I would just ask that everybody please pray for Charlie and his family. He's got 2 small children. He loves his family dearly. I know. I've seen him with them on several occasions and spoken with him privately on many occasions over the last 10 years. We almost entered politics at the exact same time in this political arena. So please pray for them. Tomorrow's Truth Thursday. We'll be talking about, ironically, one of the things is personal security with Jason at 3D. We'll see you then.